welcome to another super selection of Terrible Tales. This is your Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading us. More Terrible Tales coming up from the very sinful Radio 2 listenership. I wonder if we have the most sinning bunch of listeners. Would we be more sinful than Radio 1? Probably. I don't know, really. We're certainly prepared to confess. We ought to try out with the Radio 4 guys. So anyway, this week we have a concise collection featuring a racy, rampant ram, or two, a terrible toe-ful treat, a scary, screamy swimmer, and a daft, drunken divorcee. Well, here it all comes. Martin, thank you very much. Is there a certificate with this? Is there a warning that goes with this? No, I think... Be with you in a minute.
Good, this is great. Keep going.
No, there's not.
Oh, right.
There's a sniff of one, but there's not.
Oh, really?
Dear Father Simon, driving home the other week, listening with mirth to the confession relating to Moonshine and Custard the chickens, got me thinking about farms and animals and rekindled a story I had been saving for my memoirs, which, let's be honest, are unlikely ever to be finished. And as it does involve farm animals, a pot of paint and the ever-darkening sky of a late evening, there's ingredients enough to get Matt's, oh yes, interest from the start.
Hello.
Or hello, which you might have to make do with. It relates to a summer holiday camping on a South Devon farm in August 1977. My family, like a dozen or so others, would set up the family tent in an open field next to the farm, which made for a very rustic 2 weeks, but a ton of fun to be had by me and the other kids, as I got to see on an annual basis, if only for a fortnight. A gang of us regulars would help out on the farm in my spare time, throwing bales on a wagon at harvest time, herding the cows in and out of the milking shed, and the biggest treat, riding in the back of an open Land Rover as Farmer Paul tore up the Devon lanes to go feed the pigs in their compound. One evening, Paul and family unusually had to attend a family dinner in town, but there was one remaining chore still to be done, and the day was getting late. So he asked one of the older campers, Nigel, who must have been around 19 or so and could drive, to help him out. The final job of the day was to deliver the old ram up to Mrs. McGregor's small holding.
Yeah.
What for?
We are in that land, aren't we?
Well, it says here she's the other side of the valley as she was borrowing him for services for a week or so.
Oh.
Now, that's not ecclesiastical services. I don't think
No.
it's going
To help with the milking.
It's, well,
No?
it's
I think it
yes,
might
the
be
bigger
something
picture.
else.
it's what the ram...
Think of the bigger picture.
Very much.
Children
Red in
listen.
tooth and
Me
claw.
and a couple... Anyway, me and a couple of other teenagers joined Nigel, the driver, in helping Paul load the ram from his pen into the back of a closed Land Rover. Once safely locked in, Paul handed me a pot of what looked like gooey blue paint with a brush in it and said, hold on to this so it doesn't spill on the journey. Nigel knows what to do. Well, I took the pot and squashed into the cab with the others. Before we set off, Paul warned us that Mrs. McGregor was a frosty character and to behave. She doesn't like any fuss, so just tap on her door and let her know you've brought the ram. Drop it off in the field next to her drive where the sheep are and come straight back. So we set off. Nigel, being young and not local, drove far more carefully than Paul. Luckily, we met no traffic coming the other way, as Mrs. McGregor's small farm was on a fairly desolate tip of a peninsula. But it took us nearly half an hour along the narrow, windy lanes until we got there. Nigel, being the eldest, knocked on her door while we all waited somewhat timidly. By now it was dusk, and when she opened the door, we saw only her harsh silhouette against the lit porch. And she gesticulated to Nigel, and then the door was closed, slammed indeed, and he returned to the vehicle. Sure enough, her instructions were clear. The gate opposite her courtyard was the drop site, and we all piled out to guide Nigel through the gate and to help unload the ram. We could just about make out a small flock of sheep in the far corner of the field, but they were far enough away as to make the whole operation quite simple. A little quiet shooing and tentative waving of hands. We were, after all, dealing with a ram here, and the beast was out and disappeared into the darkening night. We climbed back into the vehicle and set off for home, happy, a job well done. As we rejoined the lane from her drive, I kicked something in the footwell of the car and pointed out to the others that we'd forgotten the paint pot. Damn, says Nigel, stops the car. He then told us we were supposed to paint the underbelly of the ram in order for Mrs. Gregor to know which sheep he had spent some quality time with.
Yeah. Hello.
To know... do you think that's a regular thing?
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yep.
Of course, by now the ram was off in the field somewhere, and none of us fancied trying to catch him when he was probably already...
Engaged.
in the mood, you know. Anyway, fearing the wrath of Mrs. McGregor, we also agreed that we couldn't just confess and leave the paint with her. So we quickly walked back to the field and then spent the next 20 minutes running around in the dark, grabbing sheep, holding them fast while we painted them as much as we could, slapping some paint on their backs. I have to admit we were probably laughing just a little and not thinking about the weirdly painted sheep that Mrs. McGregor would find in her field the next morning. But we eventually gave up and drove home. Not a word was spoken to Paul the next morning. We duly finished our holidays and let nature take its course, Father Simon, while we were safely back at school in our respective hometowns. The markings we feebly created that night, of course, bore no resemblance to actual activity. So in early 1978, Mrs. McGregor would be surprised to find clean living sheep giving birth to lambs and blue-stained mutton remaining barren. She must have wondered what on earth was going on. Baffling.
Yeah.
Ask you folks.
Yeah.
I want to apologise to Mrs. McGregor, who may well be in farming heaven by now, and Paul, who made our teenage summers a world of fresh air, fun and appreciation of the great outdoors. It was a simple error, made worse by panic and teenage innocence. I hope I'm forgiven for two reasons: that it was 1977, different times, and no harm done. Lambs were no doubt born, and the ram had a rammy kind of time.
Yeah.
But anyway, only you, dear collective, can be the judge. So it's an interesting thing. So you paint the underbelly of the ram, and then
Yes.
that tells you, as he moves around,
Yes.
what he's been up to.
When two sheep love each other very much, obviously, that's what you have to think about.
Yeah.
And the position. I'm thinking of two things here before I give my forgiveness. First of all, you know when you go back to school and they go, write about your holiday, did they give all the details then? Obviously not. And the second thing is that poor ram must have done all sorts of impossible positions to mark the paint where they put the paint on.
Ram-a-lam-a ding-dong is what I think you're heading for.
The thing is, it's one of those things that time helps here. It was such a long time ago. Beautiful, lovely written story. You're forgiven, Martin. You
Well,
did your best.
People's verdict, 88-291. Here's Matthew going first,
Yes,
looking pained.
Well, obviously these are.
He's got his, we've just lost on penalties, look about him.
No, different times, obviously. But I would say, is the blue paint thing, is that still happening now? I'd be intrigued by that, as to whether that's still the way of finding out whether the ram has been doing what the ram does.
It's just making friends.
Yes, making friends. Clearly, what this shows is that when you're in that position, you have no clue what's going on. They had no clue what they were doing. They were going round painting random lambs with the blue paint. So for that reason, I am going to forgive, because none of us would know what was going on either. So that makes it perfectly okay. We're all forgiven. Everyone's forgiven.
Oh, what a
one.
blessing.
I'd like to teach the world to sing.
And by the world of fizzy.
There you go.
This is an interesting one. This is a slight sort of warning that if you're having your meal,
Oh, right. Okay.
you might want to stop
Oh, okay.
and come back to it.
Good. I like these.
Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. This confession dates back 32 years, and the incident itself can be traced to a period around, as I recall, 8:45 p.m, plus or minus 5 minutes, on the 23rd of May, 1984, a date and time that no doubt is also etched into Simon's memory. When I got to that bit, I thought, oh no, what have I done? And as it proceeded, I realised that Michael was absolutely right. It was a relatively cold Wednesday evening, and having completed my homework, no doubt something really exciting like French or chemistry, my brother, father and I settled down to watch the mighty Spurs take on Anderlecht in the second leg of the UEFA Cup final on TV. Okay. And I was there. And
You were there?
I was actually physically, totally, literally there.
Were you the goalkeeper?
I was
Were
playing.
you the referee?
This is not relevant to the story, but I was actually there. As was the agreement at the time, we shared the jobs at home. Things like sorting out and putting the tea in the oven, washing up, clearing up, making the hot drinks. Tonight was to be no exception, and even on such a momentous and nerve-wracking occasion. So whilst my brother sorted out the pre-match dinner of putting the 1980s-style mini-frozen pizzas into the oven, I sorted out the pre-match drinks, a cup of tea for my dad and brother and an orange squash for me. The game started, and with special dispensation to have a TV dinner, Not a lot has changed. We watched avidly, waiting for Tottenham's home advantage to mean that this would be an easy victory. And quite an exciting first half it was. Half-time came, and it was my turn to help my brother wash up, clear up, and stick the kettle on, which I duly did, and rushed back just in time to see the start of the second half. However, when I returned, I realised I'd not taken the mugs and glass back through. After some cajoling, my father was persuaded to do this, and also go and make 3 teas. So having already boiled the kettle, it would no doubt only take a minute or two to do. As compensation, I agreed to get the packet of digestives. That was to be our pudding, following the frozen pizza meal. Heady dietary days of the 80s. This is how we lived. As we sat, all that technical detail, very important. As we sat down to watch the second half, dipping biscuits and watching the ensuing game, it was quite obvious that dipping and watching led to more biscuit loss than expected. Still, I thought, a nice gooey mouthful of digestive to consume at the bottom of the cup. What could be nicer? As the excitement continued, and as Anderlecht took the lead on 60 minutes to lead 2-1 across both legs with that dreaded away goal, I began to notice the pre-existing tea tide marks around the edge of the mug that I was drinking from. Hang on, I thought, this can't be my mug, as only my brother and father had drunk tea that evening. Putting it down to a poor piece of washing up, I continued to finish drinking my tea, noting that the washing up clearly had indeed been poor, but thinking nothing more of it. Eventually reaching the bottom of the mug, there was indeed a mass of digestive biscuit at the bottom. Expressing the obvious joy of a 13-year-old, I gulped the mouthful of biscuit molasses and was about to swallow it when I felt a thin and sharp object stab my tongue and roof of my mouth. And I pulled out a slightly curved, hard, yellowed object of around 2 centimetres in length and a couple of millimetres in width. On reflection, it must have looked a bit like a very jaundiced and very small pork scratching. Father Simon and the collective. So at this point, I have to beg forgiveness for my behaviour. 1, for spitting the contents of my mouth onto the table, not pretty. 2, for the shocked looks on my father and brother, for the expletives I uttered when I did so. I was only 13. Don't try that at home, kids. No. 3, from the entire Tottenham team for the loss of 1 spectator for the rest of the match. 4, for my long-suffering wife and the fact that I have since that point had my own mug, which no one on pain of death can use. And yes, it has tea tide marks that I can proudly call my own. And 5, finally, Father Simon, I must ask forgiveness for my late father, who, unbeknownst to my brother and I, had not washed up the mugs before making the post-half-time tea. Worse still, during half-time, it appears that he had decided to use his mug as a repository for his toenail clippings. Something, it seems, he had undertaken whilst we were washing up.
No.
Yes, Father Simon, what had stabbed my mouth and what I had pulled from the digestive biscuit molasses had until very recently been attached to the end of my father's ingrowing big toenail.
Dear.
Yours, Michael. P.S. I still occasionally consume pork scratchings, but I do check each individual one very carefully before eating them. Thank you very much. Anyway, there was a little warning, so I think we're all perfectly fine on that. No harm, no foul.
Yes, no. I believe that's what they say.
No one says it at all apart from you. Anyway, Sister Bobby, what do you say?
I hate those soggy biscuits at the end of tea. I just can't do it. I really can't. So I'm amazed at that. There are lots of people, I think you either are or you aren't. A soggy biscuit eater, drinker, or not. So, lovely story. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it wasn't your fault, was it? It was your dad's fault, really.
Yes.
So the thing is, you are forgiven. However, only partly forgiven, because you should have mastered by then the put it back into the cup spit motion. So you're only half forgiven because you should have done some... back into the cup. Back into the cup. That's what you should have done. Didn't have to go over everything else and spray the sofa,
but they were...
Yeah, but it's the kind... You didn't have to do the projectile. You could have just back in... Anyway, so you're half forgiven.
Half forgiven.
It's really your dad's fault.
What do you think, brother?
Well, of course, it's the dad's fault for putting the toenail clipping in the mug. However, this story highlights for me something.
Spurs won on penalties, by the way.
Yes, oh, did they? Good. Yeah, but that
people
was
might
missing.
be thinking, well, what happened?
But what happened after Anderlecht had scored the away goal?
Yes, it was all fine in the end.
Turns out it was all fine for Spurs. My particular bugbear is that I need to have my own mug in my house, and no one else is supposed to use that mug. And this story clearly illustrates what can go wrong when we all start being sharing our mugs around, and everyone can use anyone's mug because, we're all living together. Well, actually, no. We should all be using different mugs, and this shows why this would never happen.
Interesting insight into your domestic life.
In a house where everyone has their own mug. So this is what an excellent idea this is. Let's all take that as very much the lesson here, that we should all have our own mug.
Well, from this, I think we can say, having my own mug confessions, if there are any, that'll be nice. And also, things that happened whilst watching sport.
Yes.
Because the football was actually completely incidental to the story, but it wouldn't have happened without it. I don't think I need to give any warnings out for. It's certainly not a kind of it's not one of those.
There's no food.
No, there's no food. It's a little bit. Oh,
okay.
Oh my word.
Let's say.
But it's not a kind of. I wish you'd warned us. I don't think so. It's from Sarah. Anyway, Sarah, thanks very much for tonight's tale. Father Simon, I can barely type for shame. I beg your forgiveness and the forgiveness of all your listeners. I've carried the toe-cringing embarrassment. Although it says toe-cringing, it's got nothing to do with yesterday. That's not a clue. This incident like a cloak for too many years, but now it's time to share in the hope that I can shed my burden, apologise to all affected. I have to start my confession many years before the actual event. Picture a small, aggravating child. Me, says Sarah, at the beach, continuously nagging my sunbathing mother, who I wanted to come into the sea with me. The poor woman couldn't swim and just wanted to relax. We'd brought all sorts of fun, beachy type stuff to entertain little me, and there were other children around who I could have played with, but no. I wanted my mother to come into the sea and I would not leave her alone. Eventually, after much nagging, and when she could stand my whining no more, she said something which would affect me subconsciously for the rest of my life.
Okay. So no pressure. Yeah.
She told me that she didn't want to go into the sea because it was full of dead pirates. I know. But in her defence, I was a very annoying child, and I genuinely don't think that her throwaway comment was designed to be anything more than something which quietly amused her for a few seconds before slipping from her thoughts and away into the ether. Sadly, though, it jammed in my subconscious, and from that day forward I bore a horror of dark waters and all that may lay beneath. Jump ahead about 15 years. By now I was a young woman just striking out in the world, and I was with one of my college buddies on our first parentless holiday. We were in Zante and it was totally glorious. The sea was so beautiful and clear that it felt as though you could see down for miles. My friend, we'll call her Karen, was one of those annoying friends who are naturally beautiful. Karen was slim, leggy, blonde and could rock a bikini with ease. Next to Karen, I felt like a goblin. I continuously wore a long t-shirt over my swimming cosy. On the fateful day in question, Karen and I were on a small yacht, heading out on a trip to an obscure beach for a barbecue. There were people of all ages on board, and just as we neared the bay, the captain told everyone that if they wanted, they could just dive from the boat and swim to the beach. Anyone who did not want to do this could go in the dinghy with the supplies. Well, people immediately started diving from the boat and striking out towards the beach. Karen and I were amongst the people who went down a lower platform to jump in, and it was at this point that I started to wimp out a bit. I remember hesitating as I realised that I was the last of the swimmers to get into the water. I put one toe into the sea, and wow, despite the heat of the day, it was so cold. I now know that I should have just bit the bullet and jumped in, but no, I slowly slipped into the icy water feet first. Unbeknownst to me, a giant air bubble had filled my t-shirt, and as I leant forward to start swimming, it kind of blubbed down the length of my body. My suddenly phobic brain went into overdrive and berated me for not having scanned the entire stretch of totally clear water before getting in. So now clearly something was about to drag me to my watery grave, and I screamed like in a horror film. Not only was I emitting a continuous high-pitched scream, I started to swim as fast as I could. In fact, I was swimming so fast I was practically sprinting across the surface of the sea like in a cartoon. I quickly overtook Karen and despite my phobic state, was vaguely aware that she also had started to scream and swim a whole lot faster. One by one, I overtook every single person who got in before me. Surely I could have beaten all established speed records and been awarded a gold medal had I been monitored correctly. Eventually, I made it to the beach in safety. I lay face down in the sand, panting heavily. As my brain started to return to normal, I vaguely became aware of shouting. I looked up, and to my horror there were men at the sea's edge frantically yelling and urging everyone to swim faster. Get out of the sea! Other men had run out to help elderly people out of the water. Women were screaming and trying to swim, drag their children out before passing them to the men at the water's edge. The whole beach was in total chaos. Terrified faces which were now looking around, desperately seeking answers they were never going to get. What was it? Did you see? What was it? Is everybody safe? Question after question, and no one had any answers because no one knew what had happened. Some people were crying, and I sat in silent dread, prepared to totally lie my way out of the situation if necessary. Just as I thought I got away with it, Karen piped up. Well, Sarah was at the back. I think she saw it because she went past me. I don't know what people were imagining it was, but all the traumatised faces suddenly turned and faced me. Oh, blimey. Sorry, yeah, I thought a dead pirate had touched my foot. I said rather weakly. It could have, it was, I think, it was dead, it was dead, it was a pirate, parrot. Pieces of bait. I had to sit behind some rocks away from everybody else for the rest of the trip. No one wanted to swim back to the boat with me. It took ages for the little dinghy to ferry every single person back to the yacht at the end of the day. We were shunned, and even Karen looked like she was struggling to be a supportive friend. It was awful and ruined what could have been a lovely day for many people. So I need forgiveness for this holiday ruination. Some of the people involved seemed very old to my young eyes, and it took them quite a while to recover. In my defence, my brain can't be reasoned with when it's like that, and I did actually tell the truth in the end. Okay, so I had been too traumatised to come up with a plausible lie quick enough, but really, this should have been taken as a cautionary tale to all adults who say weird stuff to kids because they think it's funny.
Yeah.
So there you go at the end.
It
Thank you
is
for your
still
time,
funny.
says Sarah. Be very careful. The lies that you tell your children, Matt, and because
still gonna do it.
many years later down the line, 15 years later, it's payback time. Sister Bobby from the Priory.
Oh, Sarah, what a lovely, lovely story. I just feel for you. I had to be rescued once from the deep sea after seeing something bigger than me swimming. I saw a shark and absolutely screamed my head off. Yeah, they had to rescue me because I couldn't breathe because I was so scared. So I get the fear. I really, really do. And also, the thing is you told the truth at the end. You said, embarrassingly so, I got scared. I don't think anyone that hasn't got in the sea and gone, I can't see what's in there, and had that kind of fear. So I think you did really well by being honest. You were absolutely honest. Yeah, you had a bit of a panic, but I think they were mean to you. So I absolutely forgive you.
You never know when the dead pirate's just going to reach up and grab you.
Yes.
Brother Matthew, what do you
I'm
think?
going to forgive for two reasons. One, she manages to swim and scream at the same time.
How about that?
Which is amazing, because I can only do a few lengths and then I need to have a rest. And so she's able to swim really fast and scream at the same time. So
and overtake everybody on the way to the beach.
absolutely. Hats off to. And the reason I think actually the reason why everyone's running out of the water is that we all know we shouldn't be in the sea. We all know we shouldn't be in the sea.
Not at all.
And we're all playing the little Russian roulette by being in the sea and thinking, oh, aren't I very continental? Look at me, out in the sea and sophisticated. And no, we know we shouldn't be in there because there are things in the sea that don't like us. So that's why they were all trying to get out.
Touched
of the
on
sea.
another phobia here.
Yeah, well, don't go in the sea. Dead pirates. So I am going to forgive for those two reasons.
Tonight's tale comes from Sparky. Thank you, Sparky. Father Simon, this confession would have been better, by the way, not forgiven. Just saying, no G. This confession would have been better placed in your Christmas edition, but the divorce settlement has only just been finalised.
Oh, hello.
Okay. Well done.
It's sort of a captivating opening sentence, isn't it? I beg forgiveness, but suspect I have already been refused at a higher office than yours.
Ooh.
which is either the High Court or the Divine Pearly Gates.
Yeah, Pearly Gates.
One
That
of the
sounds a
two.
bit ominous. Not. You're not
Back
coming
in the mid-1980s, I was a young bloke interested in nothing other than football, cricket, beer and my mates. Nothing extraordinary there. I mean, wasn't every bloke? He's already lost, I'm afraid. However, when I met a real girl, one that I didn't have to ring an 0898 number to talk to, you've lost everyone else now, things changed. She was clever, ambitious, did loads of work in the community, including running a cub pack, and preferred nights in playing Scrabble and doing jigsaws to going out and getting hammered. And for some inexplicable reason, I agreed to marry her. I'm just thinking that Sparky is still a little bit cross about everything. The novelty we could finish there because it's not going to end well. The novelty started to wear off when I had to exchange my football season ticket for membership of the National Trust.
Yeah.
Also, Saturdays at the pub, and the match had been replaced by tea and cake at extortionate prices in some or other dusty old stately home, pretending, along with everyone else I might add, that I was enjoying myself. It was purgatory. I had turned into Bob Ferris and all my mates were still Terry Collier, which is a Likely Lads reference, in case you were wondering what was going on there. We moved away, and every year at Christmas, my wife refused to let my mates come and stay. "You've outgrown them," she would say. However, one year she relented and allowed them to come, not at Christmas, but in the first weekend of January. So they came on the Sunday lunchtime, and by tea time we were very merry. Although we were all approaching our 30s and in respectable employment, teachers and medics, that kind of thing, we still had a Subbuteo football competition, which included crowd noises on a cassette player recorded from Match of the Day, which we played every time a goal was scored.
Brilliant.
That's class.
But we stopped the clock so that we could rewind the tape.
Oh, right.
My wife found us giggling hysterically and disappeared off to bed at about 8 o'clock, muttering something about being juvenile. We put on a video of Botham's ashes and started on the tonic water. There have been a few edits, by the way.
Yeah.
After Beefy had dispatched the ball straight into the confectionery stall and out again, we found a black felt-tip pen and thought it would be hilarious to deface all the Christmas cards that were still on the wall. This was genius. It started off innocently at first. A moustache on the choir boy, a scar on a carol singer, and then things took a turn for the worse. There were speech bubbles on the characters in the nativity. You won't be able to broadcast them, because I don't think sarcasm and vulgarity featured in the first Christmas story. Then there were the strange additions to the snowmen, and the Christmas robins and the reindeer didn't look exactly right. I was amused, but I was ashamed at the same time. I woke about 7 with the dance company from Riverdance rehearsing in my head, and I wanted to die. And when I saw the state of the Christmas cards, I knew I would die as soon as my wife saw them. A creature of habit, she'd be up at 7:30. It was the 6th of January, Father Simon, the day the decorations come down. Brilliant, I'm thinking. Quickly ripped down all the cards from the wall, stuffed them into a carrier bag for recycling, and finished just as she appeared in the war zone masquerading as our lounge. I say tentatively, I thought I'd make a start on the decorations, dear. I lied. "Well, that's very good, darling," she replied coldly, as she stared with contempt at my comatose friends. "You see, you don't need these losers anymore." Well, if only the story ended there. As I said at the start, my wife ran the cub pack. This day being Monday, the first day back after the holidays, she had cubs that night. She decided to do their arts and crafts badge with them, and tonight's lesson was to be how to make lovely Christmas gift tags out of old Christmas cards.
Oh, no.
Unknown to me, she took the bag of cards to cubs and distributed them amongst the pack. She was inundated with confused questions. "Oh, Kayla, this snowman looks different somehow. Can you see? Is this in the Bible? Why is the angel swearing, Arcala?
Ouch.
What are those shepherds doing? Could you explain?" Anyway, the kids giggled as much as we had, but they all got into trouble for defacing Christmas cards. There was no milk and biscuits for them that night, and I didn't fess up. So I won't get forgiveness from my wife. As I say, we've recently divorced, and she won't give me anything. But
Okay.
But I would like forgiveness from my mates, whom I abandoned in the first place in pursuit of some kind of middle-class enlightenment that was clearly out of my depth. I know my place. Please, Father Cyber, forgive me. Listen, Sparky, I don't think you don't think you've covered yourself in glory there, mate, I would say. Let's, and I'm guessing a whole lot of not forgiveness, but I might be completely wrong. Let's see how forgiving Sister Bobby from the Priory reacts.
It's really sad, isn't it? Because it was a lovely love story. You see, the thing is, you fall in love with potential, and sometimes one of you or both of you are disappointed, and it's obviously where you've ended up. But actually, the situation with the Christmas cards being defaced, she didn't know where they were going. She didn't say anything, so it's one of those things where you're actually quite innocent because there was no intent really.
I don't think there's very much innocent about Sparky. Really.
Well, just on this little kind of thing of the cards, and let's face it, it's already over. So actually, for the situation of the cards,
really?
Only for the situation of the cards, I forgive you.
Well, I'm surprised, but this is an interesting turn-up. What do you think there, Nigel?
Well, I definitely don't think you should try and change someone when you meet them, go out and marry them, whatever. But I think it sounds like Sparky tried to change himself to fit in so that he would be the perfect partner for Mrs. Sparky. But he obviously got it badly wrong. And I wasn't feeling a lot of sympathy for him until you said that she went to bed at 8 o'clock in the evening.
Well, she'd obviously just given up on this hopeless bunch of juveniles.
Subbutio's a great game, though, isn't it? And with special effects, I mean, that's genius. So, because of that alone, and I still have Subbutio at home. I have young sons, of course, nothing to do with me. But I'm going to go down the special effects route. So, Sparky, for that alone, you're forgiven.
Okay, let's see what Matthew makes of that.
How did these two ever get together?
Yes.
Her National Trust and him Subbutio and tonic water. Doesn't make any sense at all. That was never going to work. Actually, your friend should have stepped in at one point and said, do you know what, Sparky, this is never going to work.
What was Mrs. Sparky thinking about? Clearly.
Well, I am going to make the point that it's actually is it not Arcala's fault for handing out these without looking at the cards first when she's handing them out to the pack and saying, right, make some Christmas ding dongs out of those, and they've no, she's got to look at the cards first. So actually, it's probably Mrs. Sparky's fault there. So I am also going to forgive.
Really?
Clean sweep there. Well done, Sparky.
For the extra ding-dongs.
Yes, for the ding-dongs.
Ding Dong Merrily on High, of course,
Indeed,
obviously,
that's what I was
with it
thinking
being
of.
the season
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Thank you very much indeed for making it all this way. Who did you forgive? Well, send in your own shadowy secret. Maybe inspired by one of those. Who knows? confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week. Don't forget you can listen to all the interviews and best bits on the iPlayer. Anthony Quinn was with us for the book club on Monday. His novel is called Freya. Author and force of nature Marion Keyes was in the studio on Tuesday. Million trillion selling pop phenomenon Enya was in the studio on Wednesday, talking about her latest CD. And Nige was in on Thursday with Sag Paneer Pie. Pie with Sag Paneer in it. Sag Pioneer as it's known. The recipe can be found on the Radio 2 page. And if you get to this point in this particular podcast, just to prove you made it to the very end, could you tweet me saying Wookie Hole? Could you just say Wookie Hole? That'll explain everything. Thank you.